Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Kanban for Everyone. I'm your host, Colleen Johnson. I am the CEO of ProKanban.org and a transformation coach with Agile Velocity. And today we're going to be talking about Kanban for education. I'm really excited about this topic. I think it's one that we're not spending enough time talking about. And so I'm very excited to welcome our guests to the show today. We're going to be joined by Jeff Burstein, who is the founder of the Learning and Educational Agile Framework, better known as LEAF. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Colleen. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to having the conversation so that we can get more people talking about this.
Yeah, 100%. Me too. And it's such an important thing to talk about right now. We've been having some conversations with some of your colleagues on the Agile Uprising podcast over the last couple months, trying to get the word out about this. And every conversation leaves me more and more excited about the possibilities of what you're doing and how you're trying to help bring Agile practices into the education world. So let's start at really kind of a high level here. I'm sure this list isn't short, but if you had to talk through some of the problems that you're seeing in the education space and what got you really interested in trying to solve those problems, what are some of the key things that you feel like education is facing these days?
Sure. Well, so I think it's important to give a little context, right? LEAF really came out of the pandemic when we went into lockdown in schools. All of a sudden, things that had been around for a while started surfacing. Right. So if you think about that in terms of agility, we generally will tell people that, hey, Agile is a great way to start uncovering where you have some opportunities to improve. And then you can now start actually improving it. And it was really this change of context, this, if you think back to about 2.5 years ago, VUCA was a very popular phrase, this volatility, uncertainty that we were all experiencing. And, while all that was going on, I was engaged at, doing an agile transformation at an enterprise, a very large, global company, if I'm not mistaken. And, while we were getting ready to go into their quarterly planning, all of a sudden it's like pivot, and we could handle it. And while schools were unable to. And so that was really one of the key things. And so when you look back at that time, it really started, accentuating some of the problems. And some of the things that really became highlighted was, the educational systems that we have today were designed to prepare students to enter a certain kind of workforce, working in very traditional ways where, it's more, work done by rote. But as we've progressed further and further into the digital transformation, right, the need for knowledge workers, for people who can be both complex and adaptive to solve problems they've never done before, has created this need to start having education start changing as well, and then everything just kept snowballing. So, there really is a long list. I mean, you can open up a newspaper on any given day, go to a website, turn on any news. And as soon as they start talking about education, you'll start hearing about some of the challenges.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you say that about, these new ways of working not being present in how we're teaching kids. And I've had an opportunity to do some work with one of the local dev boot camps here in Denver. And it was like not even a full day. I think it was like a half day workshop on Agile was the only introduction to the practices, I think, of the entire curriculum. And it's like we're failing everybody who are going in, not just into the workforce, but into technology specifically to equip them with the skills that we're expecting them to come to the table with in terms of collaboration and working in small teams and all of these things we want them to be able to do, right? It's like we're springing it on them once they get their first job, which seems like that's not going to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit too about the teaching side of this in the classroom. And that's been a very important topic in the ability to pivot, and especially during COVID. I think we're also joined here by Roz Jackson, who is a teacher. Welcome, Roz, and thanks for joining us on such short notice.
No problem.
Roz is being super agile here today and is joining us at the very last minute. And we're also joined here by Simon. And Simon has been really active here in the community in trying to help bring a lot of these agile practices, not just into the classroom, but also into the administrative side of education. Simon, will you tell us a little bit about what that piece looks like and what problems you're trying to solve on the administrative side?
Sure, I can. Almost none of the entire conversation has come through smoothly on audio. I have quite poor rural internet. So at the point that I started glitching out, please just interrupt me or like go like this or something so we can spare a needless tirade. Yeah, so at the administration level, essentially what you're trying to do is ride this insane bucking bronco of unpredictability. You have a system that you're trying to make work smoothly. You're there for the kids, and you feel a little bit like the pressure inside of a Tesla valve. A Tesla valve is a system that basically forbids flow through it. So within that system, everyone's pushing hard, everyone's aligned, but they're perfectly disorganized to actually change the problems that they need to face. At the administrative level, what you're basically building are information radiators. And I'm going to slow down quite a bit because that's going to sound weird to a lot of people. Like, is that really safe? Or what does that radiator look like? Or, an information radiator is just an easy, simple way for everyone who's showing up at work to just see what is on the mind of leadership that day. It is truly as complicated as that. Wouldn't you like to know what the priorities are on any given day? Wouldn't you like this information radiator to just radiate that to you in kind of like an obvious way? You built those, and Jeff has built those for 20 years, and I've built them with Rosalind for, I don't know how many years, fewer than 20 years, but some years. And people are like, oh, well, this is just so nice. I wake up and it's a little bit quieter at school because there's just flow. And flow actually is quiet, right? Within the school, you feel some days are like high turbulence days and it's just like loud. Those quiet days are when things are going right, when the learning flow is happening. So you're just trying to like understand the patterns as a team, do the team practices, have your work visible, and then just go outside and have fun with people and just live the promise of Kanban, which is just to experiment in a joyful way about how to learn things better together and stop trying to make it a competition, which just doesn't make any sense anymore.
I love that. It's funny, whether we're talking about education or software development, or we've had these conversations now about marketing and UX, the simplicity of visualization and visualizing the work that you have in front of you seems so obvious. But the benefits of it are like tenfold, right? Exactly what you're describing here, giving people the option to see what's coming next. What are we working on now? Where are we at in this process is really kind of amazingly powerful.
Just imagine being a student. You always wanted to know what is on the teacher's mind.
Right. Yeah. What are we doing?
Your
next?
boss, right? Think about your boss. Your boss is sort of a teacher, or at least there's this authority thing. So it's like, well, let's just create some transparency about where we're trying to go and be friendly together. And again, like I said, get out of this just somewhat useful, but totally overrated competition mindset within schools that focuses away from teams, which don't deliver value against complex problems, which we've known for a very long time.
And I think I'm going to steal that term, Simon. I think you said joyful. What did you call it? Joyful improvement. I really love that. That has a very different feeling than like, let's fix all of our problems, right? Joyful improvement is a much more amazing way to think of that. Well, let's hear from Roz. Roz, you're a teacher. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what brought you to looking for agile practices and what problems you were trying to solve in the classroom with your students.
Honestly, to steal Simon's quote again, it was definitely joyful improvement, but I didn't know that that's what I was looking for. But kind of like the Supreme Court says, they kind of know it when they see it. So I knew it when I felt it. And it was something that the coaches at Leaf, the community at Leaf, I learned it for myself first. I went through my own kind of improvement kata to learn how the system worked, how I could improve it, because I'm willing to try anything, especially if it's for the benefit of kids, but I also want to see how things work and kind of try to break it apart and figure it out. And it was amazing. It helped my husband and I accomplish a very important personal goal for us. And then when Jeff challenged us, it's like, okay, great. So you think you know it? Let's do it with the kids. And anytime I get a chance to try something with students and it gets to torture them a little bit and they get to learn, I'm all for it. But they kind of taught me, which is awesome. They taught me stuff about using Kanban zone that I did not know. And it was weird that we were all collaboratively learning together. And that just made it more meaningful for me as a teacher and especially for them as students, because you could see the empowerment that they had, that light bulb going on when they're like, wait a minute, Miss Jackson doesn't know this. She's telling us to figure it out. And they just went full steam ahead and they were able to accomplish so much more than even I thought they would. And as a teacher, that's why you get up every single day, is when they can accomplish something and they do more than you would even plan. They rise to the occasion every single time, as long as we get out of the way. And it's through stuff that we know we should be doing, small steps to achieve those goals every single time, asking them questions, asking them to reflect how you can make it better, no matter what you are doing, no matter what topic it is, no matter whether it's in school or your personal life. That's how you improve. And to be able to see that and break it down and consciously try to do that every day with those students, and then to get out of the way and let them do it for themselves with their groups, you couldn't plan it better. You really couldn't. It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, and it's really what's at the heart of Agile, right? That feeling of empowerment, of control, organizing around your own work and coming up like that giving that ability to kids is really what's missing, right? From a lot of what we're trying to do. We're creating so much structure. There's no autonomy and ownership left for them. So
Exactly. I feel like it's kind of like what my dad says, sometimes in education, we're majoring in the minors. So all the little minutia that we're trying to do to make sure we're hitting all those boxes, if you remove all of that, you hit all those boxes and more. And I think we just need to get out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeff, I want to come back to you for a moment. So, there's a lot of things, I think, in conversations you and I have had in the past, of things that you've tried. And maybe tell us a little bit about what other, not just Agile practices, but what other methods or experiments did you run before you started dabbling with Kanban?
Sure. And I'll give you the short version of the entire history of all the failures that got Leaf to where it is. When we first started seeing the challenges that the educational sector was facing at the beginning of the pandemic, I was actively engaged in doing large scale SAFe transformation. So these are scale, based on the Scale Agile framework, and it's all of their, structured agility. And so, when I went to go meet with, leaders in education, it's like, hey, we do this thing. It helps companies, it helps in industry and government, and the Department of Defense is spending millions of dollars on coaching, right? Why isn't the Department of Education? All these things, and the feedback and actually the response that we got was, well, we don't do that here. Right? We are not building a product. We don't have a service. We are shaping the young minds of today to, address the problems of tomorrow. And that's the epiphany that we had. It's, well, actually, the way that people solve problems today is not by sitting in a room for 50 minutes and having someone talk at them, and then everybody take a test, and the person who does best can now solve the problem. We have to teach collaboration. So what if we started structuring it differently? And it really wasn't until fast forward several bad ideas, including we'll just do a 2-day class, and people will sit in the class and they'll take a test for whatever, and if they get a certain score, congratulations, you now know how to bring Kanban into your classroom. Right, that it took those opportunities to really get to the point where I was able to meet educators like Rosalind and her partner Jessica, who through conversation, it was talking about the experiences that they had, and we tried to help them in collectively. So in Jessica's class, Rosalind's partner, she had found a version of Scrum that was recaptured to address learning in the classroom. right? And while it was a very effective means for, for her as a teacher to gain some control at the beginning of the pandemic, the students quickly got to the point where it's like, hey, we get the teaming idea. We're not sure of all the structure, the training wheels that are needed. We think we want to move faster, but the structure kept, limiting it because things were time bound. How do you break down learning into 2 weeks? What if it takes longer? Right? And is learning the thing the key, or is understanding, how to apply it more important? And so it became through these conversations that we started pivoting and trying different things. And ultimately, to a point that Simon had mentioned earlier, really came back to flow. Yeah. Right. And understanding that, learning happens in stages, right? I think the new word that I'm learning is synthesis. It is synthesized at different stages, where first you're exposed to a concept, and that's great. Now you've got to practice, how might I use that? Then you got to take that and put that together with other things that you've practiced. And now, can I do something with it? Can I apply this knowledge to my actual life? So when asked like, ooh, what are some of the things that you might try in a classroom? It's like, okay, what if 8th grade students had to, learn writing, but the way they demonstrated their skill is they had to come up with an ad for a product that they liked, or a 1-page slick that would talk about it and try to tap into certain emotions. And it had to have the proper grammar and punctuation and, and all that stuff. Right now, so there is I've learned the basic mechanics of writing. I've practiced some things. Now I've run a little experiment where I see if I can do something. And now I'm pulling a project through, and now my learning experience is different. Right. And so and I will say this, in having worked with educators like Rosalind and Jessica, and we have other teachers that we've worked with overseas, they have taught me a lot. So, in being able to hand over agency to the students so that they can pull the learning, right? They're now able to, for themselves, go ahead and differentiate their own learning speeds. Right? They're able to accelerate when they need to, right? Collaborate when they have to, and gain the value of shared knowledge almost all the time, right? And we start to see a difference and a shift in the way students behave and in the way that they themselves synthesize the knowledge, so that now it is actually practical and applicable in their lives, right? And so purpose is right there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Roz, I'd love to introduce Jessica, who's been working with you on this. We'll pull Jessica into this conversation too. And I'd love to hear from Roz and Jessica a little bit more about what this actually looks like in the classroom, right? So Jeff just described a little bit, and welcome, Jessica. Thank you for joining us today too. Jeff was just describing a little bit about the transition from trying Scrum and having time boxes in the classroom, and how that eventually led to a more flow-based approach for the students. Jessica, how did you tee that up for them? Or was it a very organic cutover from Scrum to Kanban? Or was it something where you had to come in and say, okay, here's the differences and here's why we're going to transition?
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you for having me here. I would say that the kids naturally transitioned into Kanban in a more flow-based approach. I think that starting with Scrum was a good idea to kind of teach them how to have stand-up meetings, how to communicate, but they very quickly were like, oh no, kids just adapt faster to systems than adults do. So once they kind of got the hold of it, they just started running with it, and they didn't need the events so much because they had learned how to work in teams. And once they had that foundation, they were able to pull that across any content area. And you could really see it develop very quickly, that they didn't need 15-minute time blocks, and they didn't need events to do these kinds of skills. They were running them anyway. The reflection was constant. The communication was constant. They were constantly running the board. So you would see them at first, my boards were up on my wall. So they would be standing at the wall and just, Vanna Whiting the wall to each other and explaining, well, if we pull this first, then this has to come next, and this has to go to done. And we only have so much room. So this is, it naturally developed as soon as they had the tools ready to them, because kids are naturally ready to work in teams and to collaborate. And so they don't need they don't need as much training as adults do. And so that's kind of the really fun part. And then you see them pulling it in other spaces. So kids that I taught in history the other teachers weren't teaching the same way, but you can hear them talking about it. Okay, well, if we do this first, then we can go this next. So they were pulling it into other parts of their lives as well. So you can imagine that if you had a school that was fully enabled, what would really happen? You know, how fast could that curriculum flow? What kind of tasks could the kids pull? What kind of projects and application could they get to? It's really extraordinary when you consider all the things that just come organically to kids because they're not afraid to try and they adapt so quickly.
Yeah, I saw Simon, you were laughing when she said that the students were dropping ceremonies and just adapting more quickly. It sounds like more just in time or more real time decision making was taking place, which is what we want out of a Kanban team, right? Yep. Tell me why you're laughing. Tell me what your thoughts are here on what was taking place for Jessica's class.
Sure. So what you're seeing is nothing more than permissionless innovation within a nice, clean sandbox.
Yeah.
Create a good sandbox, keep it clean, show the kids how to run it right. That's just how humans are.
Yeah. Well, maybe not the grown humans.
Oh, no,
the little humans seem to be pretty good.
So, I mean, it's just not that complicated. Like, think about it when you're a kid. You breathe from way down in your lower abdomen and you keep yourself calm. And then you get older and you think more and then up in here and feel on teams where at a sustainable pace so you don't get into that like flustered, flooded mode. That's when you learn more. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi did all this research about flow states. That is when you're gluiest. That's when knowledge sticks. You know, I'm laughing because this is like a series of just incredibly obvious propositions that we've known for a very long time, combined in a strange way.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, it's a lean system for creating a particular sort of collaborative knowledge. You can point that at a firehouse. You can point that at a restaurant. You can point that at a military group. You can point that at a family. You can point these just basic ways of working. And, you know, Bruce Feiler described this years ago in Secrets of Happy Families, Chapter 1. Right? The blueprint is out there. It's been there for a while. You just have to let on your big kid pants and be like, okay, this is going to kind of suck for a little bit as we stumble through something different. And it's going to be worth it. Why? Because for 30 years, people have been finding it's off with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's
I think that need to have it be perfect out of the box is probably what leads us to a lot of more rigid frameworks, right? Like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I don't want to stumble through the mess of trying to refine it and figure things out and get things working the way that we need them to work for our specific context. And I think that's really where Kanban shines, right? Is we start with a little bit of a recipe, a very simple recipe for flow, and how to put the systems in place to identify the opportunities to improve. And then we work from there. And really, by the end of it, everything should look very different from where you started, because that's the point, right? We're refining as we go. Roz, let's go to you. So
Maria Montessori has described this for decades. And I just hope that your listeners be like, oh, Maria Montessori has been doing this for 80 years. Oh, these schools, right? This is not just new wacky stuff that the three of us have come up with. This is a body of knowledge that we're refining, in real life with people who are having fun with it.
Yeah. And bringing together, I think, a little bit of the business world while you do it, right? Like Jeff said, marrying up, like, what do you need to know as you enter into the workforce, and how do we equip kids better for that while they're in school? Roz, tell us a little bit about your experiences in the classroom and how you came to Kanban, how it helped solve some of these problems for what you were struggling with.
For me, I came to Kanban through Jessica. And unfortunately for me, which is a major regret, I came a few months after her because I was too afraid to try something new. And that's like a major thing to admit because I was always like a non-traditional teacher. I would do inquiry-based, I would do project-based learning. So I already was kind of on that quote unquote progressive side. And even this, because of just the difference of it, I was still like, no, I'm going to stay in my PBL box. I'm going to stay right here where I'm comfortable. And I think this alludes to what Jeff and Simon were saying before, is that And you guys were just saying how you want to stay in that rigid framework because we're too afraid to fail, and you want to have those set deadlines and that set process. And if we keep sticking to those boxes, this will eventually work. And the thing is, what I noticed when I was looking at Jessica's students, they were working, but they were working faster, and they were having more fun than my students, who were still doing projects and still cool and all of that kind of stuff, but they were having more. And I'm that person where it's like, well, I want that. I'm jealous of other teachers whose kids are having more fun and they're learning. I want that too. I want my kids to have that kind of fun. And so I think that kind of thing is attractive when you see students having more fun while they're learning, when you hear them talking in the hallway. Especially a lot of my students from the prior year had Jessica the next year, because I teach 7th grade, she teaches 8th grade. And so if my 8th graders come back to me and, hey, we're doing this and this in Miss Cavallero's class, and this is cool, and it reminds me of what we did, but this is so much better. And I'm like, well, okay. And then so when Jessica tells me about the Leaf community, and I'm like, oh, this is what you're doing? She's like, I told you we were doing this before. And so now I'm like, okay, now I'm finally ready. I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to get better, and I'm going to make my kids better. And it's really, I think, just that simple. Us, showing and leading by example in the small ponds where we are. And we're going to talk about it. Our students are going to talk about it. Our students are going to talk about it to their friends, to their other teachers, like the students did with me, to their parents. And their parents are going to know because their parents are using this in business. So how much more would parents not want their students to go through those pain points of, oh my gosh, I have to learn this new way of thinking? Those parents that know that and know the pain that they went through in their jobs, they're like, oh no, teach my kids this, teach them now. It saves those who are going to have that entrepreneurial spirit. They won't have to train their people because they'll already know it. So when they onboard people in the businesses they're creating, in the apps they're creating, in the new environments, they will have this mindset already. And so it helps us even just overall as a society, just to be better. Like, why wouldn't you want that? Isn't that what schools are for? To train us to add more value, not to say, okay, we're going to train you this way. And then when you get out of college, after you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and you're working for this company, now we're going to train you about what you really should do. That doesn't seem very logical to me. So we're working on doing it now.
Yeah. Well, you said something that really stuck with me just now, Roz, of the students saying like, hey, we did this thing in this one place and I want to figure out how to do that and make it better. Right. And it's this constant innovation, constant feedback loop, constant opportunity for improvement. I'll open this up to everybody. But does anybody have any stories with maybe a more specific, like more student driven example of where the students identified an opportunity like that you could share?
I'll take one. I had one. My students, we did a project where they had to monitor how much plastic they were using. It was when an oceans unit we were doing. So for 24 hours, I had to monitor how many like physical touches they had with something that either was made or used plastic, from your food to what you use when you get up and get dressed in the morning, your phone, your car, everything. And they realized some of them, it was thousands of times a day. I mean, if they were accurately doing it. And so it prompted them to start social awareness campaigns online. It prompted one to have a meeting with the head of our school about our lunch materials, or how we used plastic to use those containers for our cafeteria. The receptacles that we had around the school, were they sufficient? Did we have enough, or was it just window dressing around that? So just to also, one of them sparked a club that we were running at the school, like about how to get more awareness about how they were using plastic. So those things, they prompted them to take their own action in their own communities. Yes, somewhere at the school, but some of them started things that they were doing in their own communities outside of school. So those are the things where you are seriously empowering those students to have their own voice, even apart from the assignment that you start with them in the classroom.
That's awesome. I love that example. And that ties back a lot to the visibility piece of things that we were talking about too, right? You're making something really tangible for them so that they can identify where they need to, what improvements they want to make.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about tools here. So I think, Jessica, I heard you mention Kanban Zone. Tell me a little bit about the tools that you're using in the classroom. Is it software based? Is it old school sticky style boards? How does this manifest for the students?
That's a great question, because we want to open up the availability of this to everyone. So it shouldn't have to be regulated to one way or another. When I first started, it was painter's tape and sticky notes, but I also started this when we were hybrid learning. So it was, I had kids I'm Florida based, and I had kids in Alaska and kids in South Carolina and all over the country. So I built a template on Jamboard. So they had like those sticky boards there. They had sticky boards on the wall, just different ways that they could collaborate. Roz and I have worked with a teacher in a Title I school that has no wall space. And so we built Kanban boards out of like manila folders. And so the kids can have them open during the project and then fold them up when they're done and put them away. So there's lots of ways that we can facilitate this kind of learning. We prefer Kanban Zone because it's an excellent tool. It really helps kids once kids can jump into it. And especially, I'm a humanities teacher. Not everyone is humanities brained. So you want to bring the interest to all students. So I have my students that are very into tech and they don't see the reason why they have to do humanities, but they can build a board. And they can go into Board Designer and build out the board that they like, and they can figure out the functions of it, and they can go into the cards, and the cards have so many features about who can own the card and what's the size of the card and how does it fit into their width limit and things like that, that they really get to dive deep into it, that you have all kinds of brains can jump into this and really find themselves within any content area or any space. And so we really like that about Kanban Zone. But again, this is not just you have to buy a software to have this kind of mindset. It's the development of bringing education to the students in a way that it's student-based and letting the teachers become facilitators. And any means that we have to do that is worth exploring to bring it to every student, because really we can run those Kanban boards in so many different ways, as long as we get that kind of flow-based thinking and that pull-based education into the hands of so many students.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's the same thing we would do with the software team, right? It's like meet them where they are, understand what tools they have in place. We try not to introduce too much more complexity. And, sometimes I feel like once you introduce the tool, the things that they take issue with are about the tool and not about the flow and the process that you're trying to introduce. And so starting simply is usually the easiest way to get everybody used to the mechanics and understanding what.
And that's definitely more true for teachers, is that the students jump into Kanban Zone and love it. They love all the tools and all the things that they can get into it. The teachers see all the buttons and go like, so it's finding where you are within both of those spaces and what kind of administration and what kind of educators you have, just to make it like, hey, if you just want to be introduced with flow, here's an easy way to do it. If you want more complexity, if you want it to build, here's how we can build it. And then really it's about the communication and transparency, because if you're going to be a facilitator as a teacher, you need ways to be able to see workflow, because you're still accountable for your kids' learning. So this is not, a free-for-all of sticky notes flying everywhere. So you need to be able to see, and the Kanban Zone really helps with that, what's being pulled, when the due dates are, who's where, the communication within all of the different parts, which really enables that transparency.
Definitely. Jeff, how about from your perspective? I know you've had a lot of exposure to a lot of different tools, I believe, and be curious how you're implementing some of that on the administration side.
Yeah, so kind of to the point that you were kind of alluding to, Colleen, earlier, which was, when involved in doing any kind of agile transformation work, there's several different components. And like any good Kanban team, you're going to minimize your WIP. Let's learn one thing at a time. And, the number of times I've walked into an organization and it's like, ooh, we need you to teach our teams Kanban, and we need you to teach them how to do DevOps, and we need you to teach them how to do it in this particular tool. And it's like, how about we just teach them one thing? Let's get that done. Then we can teach them another thing. Right. And so, the point that Jessica made is that allusion right to it is, and we really do want to meet people where we're at. The fact that we find a tremendous amount of value out of Kanban Zone is because we have tried it many different ways, right? And the fact that none of us are particularly technical. Right. I guess, within the limitations that each of the different work tracking programs have, that we use out there, there's ways to do a lot of things, but, this one's just really easy for us. So we use that, but it is by no means, to Jessica's point, necessary. We know eventually we're going to be reproducing a lot of the boards that are available as templates inside of Kanban Zone as two-dimensional foldable boards with like game pieces. Why? Because not every school has access to internet. Not every town has, Wi-Fi. Not every student is going to have the ability. And if we can, stick a bunch of lessons that fold flat into a backpack with stickies and markers and things and send that out, and now you've enabled some small school in some rural middle of nowhere because they have no access to, to certain things. Hey, that's great. And now those students also are not constrained by that context, and now are given that exact same opportunity to practice these skills, to learn them, to master them, to use them for their community, to improve it over time slowly.
Yeah, you're forcing me to rethink some of the things I've said in the past about personal Kanban when I used to have to travel a ton for work. And that question would come up of personal Kanban. I was always like, well, I can't take a board with me on the road, but you're right. Let's figure out what's the lowest fidelity way to do this simply so you can take this with you and understand the mechanics. So I might invest in some manila folders, you guys. It's a good tip. I'll take it. Well, let's talk about what's next. How do we help other teachers, other schools, other places explore this? You guys have a bunch of amazing offerings that you're working on. Let's start with the Teachers Lounge. Who wants to talk about Teachers Lounge?
I'll jump in here. I love the Teachers Lounge. So we host a Teachers Lounge every Wednesday, and we bounce it back and forth between noon and 3 o'clock so we can hit that lunchtime for East Coast and West Coast and everyone in between, so that we can bring in the largest audience possible. And the Teachers Lounge is not just for teachers. It's for students. We have some very, just brilliantly intelligent students coming in and talking about their perspective and what they're seeing in education. Not just from the learning point of view, but from what they're seeing from their teachers, and the changes that have come since the pandemic. We have parents, we have business executives, education affects everyone. And so this is everyone's discussion. And so what we're really trying to build is a space for people to come in, voice their concerns, and collaborate so that we can build a better system for all students. And so that really takes the voice of all people, because no matter where you are, whether you have children or you do not, education and the kind of opportunities we're providing to our students really affects our entire society. So feel free to come in. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to talk. You can just sit back and listen. You can make connections. It's just learning about kind of what's out there. And it's a really great tool. I can tell you, as a teacher that was really scared about my career, this was a great opportunity to reach out and build outside of education skill and meet other people and see what other people are doing. So it's a professional development in a way. For students, it gives them a voice. They're not often heard. For administrators, you get that point of view. So you're getting this mix of points of view that you don't really get in other places. Usually it's very singular. And so we're just building out and brainstorming and taking all different points of view. And it's a great use of 45 minutes. We have a great time. New people worldwide. We have people coming from everywhere. So it's a great place to join and just meet like-minded people that really want to have lasting change for kids.
That's amazing. Yeah, we'll make sure we get the link for the Teachers Lounge in the show notes. So this will be in YouTube as well. We'll make sure it's posted in the show notes for YouTube so that we can include that if anybody is interested in joining. And I think that's such a great effort that you're trying to make that accessible to anyone. I think in the Agile community, we have a tendency, it's a little bit of an echo chamber sometimes, the same people having the same conversations about the same things. And in the spirit of improvement, we're never going to get better at what we do if we don't open up our conversations to different perspectives, different environments, different backgrounds. And so I think that's such an amazing way to expand not just what you're doing, but how you're doing it, right? So that you can keep learning from other people. So kudos to all of you for that. Any other places you would like to point our listeners or viewers before we open it up for questions?
Yeah, I mean, people can always just go to leaf.org, l-eaf.org, and, you can check out the framework. You'll find links to the, to register for the Teachers Lounge. And, from there you can, learn more about the framework. And we have some additional sites that are going to be coming online in the next couple of weeks where we'll be showcasing, some of the talks and, stuff that we've recorded at conferences is, again, just as an opportunity to, share the work that's going on. We find and have built this community around the idea that if we find people who are kind of heading in a similar direction, if we all start working together, maybe we'll get there a little faster. And so we just keep creating opportunities to do that.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. Well, I know we had a little bit of a glitch with LinkedIn, but if anybody is still there, I saw Dory add a comment, so I think we may have popped back up on LinkedIn Live. If anybody would like to post any questions in the comments for our guests today, feel free to add questions there. While we're waiting for some viewer questions, I'll kick one over for Roz. Roz, what's one tip you have for teachers looking to get started?
One tip I have for teachers willing to get started is don't chicken out like I did. And remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Be willing to try or update one thing. You don't need brand new lesson plans. You don't need a new textbook. You don't need anything new. The only thing new that I think you should bring is your mindset. Be open to the possibilities. So if there's this one project that you want to do, this one lesson that you've always done, great. Think about one thing you can change in that one lesson that's going to give students more choice and voice. And that's where you start.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Awesome. How about for you, Jessica?
I think facing the landscape we have in education right now, where all we hear in the news is about teachers leaving the profession and shortages everywhere. I want teachers to really know that this is an evolution of their career, that this is learning skills that open up all new opportunities for you, but more so make being in the classroom more enjoyable. Is that we've really been constrained and lost creativity and agency in the classroom. And by taking this transition and developing an agile mindset, it really takes you back to that sweet spot of why you came to education in the first place. You're really able to facilitate constant light bulb moments. You're able to build those relationships, and the ownership of learning goes on to the kids. So it's not so much pressure on your shoulders. So if you're a teacher that's really struggling with the idea of going back and all the things that you have to do, this is an excellent way to go back to really loving your profession again while building other skills for both of you and the students. So I think that's so important to really stress is this is a game changer for keeping teachers in classrooms, keeping those really great teachers that really care in classrooms with the kids that need them most.
Yeah. Man, it's so interesting hearing both of you say this advice for teachers. I feel like hopefully our audience is also made up of a lot of agile practitioners, agile coaches, Kanban enthusiasts, but all of this is so relevant for that too, right? That open mindset, progress, not perfection, looking at all of these different experiments and opportunities as a way for us to improve, not just improve the way that our teams deliver. So I love hearing this from you guys because it's relevant for us too. It's relevant in the agile space. It's relevant for software delivery, and we forget it a lot. I think it can become very mechanical. We're repeating the same cycles over and over. And we forget that this is a journey, right? And not a destination. So yes, Dory added here, lifelong learning, student success. Yeah.
If I could just say too, Colleen, how much better would your jobs be if we trained your kids in this mindset before you had them? You would change your whole profession too and make it more meaningful, because you wouldn't be coaching adults through these hurdles. The students wouldn't have developed those blockages to begin with. So everything evolves and gets better when we really invest in education. So It's a great system up transformation.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank all of you, Jeff, Simon, Roz, Jessica. It has been a pleasure chatting with you all today. For all of our listeners, thank you for joining us today. This will be posted to YouTube and our Kanban for Everyone channel. We'll be kicking off again in 2 weeks with Kanban for security. So if you're interested in learning more about how Kanban can be applied to help security teams deliver quickly and deliver more value, please join us for that conversation. But thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we're excited to learn more through the Teachers Lounge. So check that out if you are interested in learning more about Kanban for education. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.